Play the lottery with Jackpocket. What's Jackpocket? Jackpocket is the lottery app that lets you play New Jersey lottery games right on your phone. People have won over $5 million playing the lottery on Jackpocket. Download Jackpocket and get a free Mega Millions ticket using promo code CASH. Jackpocket. Play the New Jersey lottery on your phone. Must be 18 or older to play. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Please visit jackpocket.com/TOS for full terms of service.
Hi, welcome to Metro by T-Mobile.
Hi, my dad is in serious need of an upgrade.
Yeah, my phone's a fossil.
He needs a new phone and a new network stat.
Well, when he switches to Metro, he can get an amazing iPhone 7 with HD Retina display for just $99.99 after ID validation.
Wow, $99.99?
Bye-bye, fossil.
Requires porting of eligible number not currently active on T-Mobile network or active on Metro in past 90 days. With validation of ID. An independent database limit 4 per account/household. 32 gigabyte model only. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Hello, listeners of the Mad Scientist Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Cogswell, here with my co-host, Marie Mayhew. Marie.
Chris, what's going on? What's the story? What's the haps?
Nothing much. You know what? It's a great day. It's like 30 degrees here in Minneapolis, which is 30 degrees warmer than it was yesterday.
It's springtime.
Super exciting. Woo! Anyway, so today, listeners, we have a really interesting episode. We're going to do a discussion with NK Kranda, who is an experiencer researcher. Now, for those that don't know kind of what the term experiencer means, we talked with Jeb Card when we were doing spooky archaeology, which we'll be getting back to shortly. But when we were talking to him, he mentioned this idea of the unified field theory of the paranormal, or this idea that people are now kind of moving away from the nuts and bolts view of paranormal fields and moving more towards a more metaphysical kind of viewpoint, where like Descartes' demon, or like these other kinds of, sensory altering events or sensory altering views or theories, that perhaps all of these strange things people are seeing or experiencing come from one underlying phenomena or cause. Experiencers are sort of, those are the people that have those experiences, the people that have those events. They're not necessarily abductees. They're not necessarily people who have seen a creature or something. They're people who have had some experience with the kind of unknown world. Now, for the biologists listening, you might be thinking, well, doesn't this disabling, or this kind of, not really disabling, but doesn't this breaking up of the categories make things less easy to understand? Right? So this idea in biology of, if you were just studying cats and dogs as if they were both mammals, you would learn less than if you studied them on their own terms. There's something to be said for that as well. However, when you're trying to do what NK does, what Nikita here does, which is kind of to collect these stories, understand them, and put them in their proper context, it's really important to kind of look at these things in a cohesive way. So, with that, Nikita, do you want to give us a little bit of your background?
How's it going there, Chris?
It's going great. Super excited to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is NK Kranda, also Nikita, and I am an experiencer, researcher, and preservationist. And what I do is experiencers tend to find me, or I find experiencers that have either listened to podcasts or decided to email me. And what I do is I kind of walk them through an interview, and they tell me about their experiences and their life stories. And what I do is I preserve that. I do audio recordings. I also do email recordings and things like that, where either they want to write their own experience, or I can kind of help them write their own experience. Basically because I was just really inspired by some things that happened in my own life and with my close friends, because I have been doing this for over a decade, where this incredible story would happen to someone and they couldn't talk about it because they would be told that they were crazy, or they could lose their job, or they could lose their kids. And in this solitude, it was just really immensely depressing for them. And they had just these wonderful things that they wanted to talk about. And when you never can, that testimony dies off when the person leaves this earth. So that's basically my main mission, is that I want to get these people out there. I want to teach them to honor themselves because they survived. I want to teach them to believe in their own voice and that it does mean something and that it's okay to talk about these things, because experiencers are not as alone or as rare as they tend to think that they are.
Super interesting. So, I mean, how, I guess, to start with, right? You got involved in this because of some things that happened in your life, and you said friends and things like that. But kind of, I guess, what was the mechanistic, like your mechanism for getting started, right? Or what is your process, I should say, maybe, to collect these stories? Like, do you take, to start with, I guess, what is your mechanism for doing this? Like, what do you mean by collecting these stories?
What I mean by collecting these stories is basically how I begin this process is that let's say that someone will connect to me maybe over email, or maybe we'll just even meet in a grocery store, which happens to me all the time. And a person will say, this strange thing happened to me, and, maybe I'm not sure exactly what it is or why it happened, but it still happened and I don't have anyone to talk to about it. So either I'll do one of two things. I'll just have basically an honest heart-to-heart with them. I'll try to bring that person back to some kind of equilibrium. They feel a lot better. I offer them a preservation. They say no. They kind of go about their lives and I never see them again. The other way that this goes through is that I can recommend a preservation for them. Like, I think that was a really amazing or meaningful experience. Would you like to come with me and have an interview so that I can preserve that? And if they agree, either we'll email back and forth for a while. Sometimes we'll do phone calls. Sometimes we can do like a Facebook video call or a Zoom call, and I can actually record their own voice telling me that testimony. And that's my favorite, to hear an experience or talk about their own experiences with their own voice. And I put all of this into kind of their own file, and then I keep it with my other preservations. So I do everything from people that have been abducted by people that have been contacted, things that are paranormal like ghosts. I've also done a lot of cryptid stories. I've done a bunch of near-death experiences. I also have training in, which is a very white person word, but I have training in shamanism and spiritualism and things like that. So I have a long, multifaceted background when it comes to talking to these people and basically just being non-judgmental and, listening, which is a really important thing when you're an interviewer. You don't want to be doing most of the talking. Mm-hmm. And I think that the most important aspect of what I do is that I have a very long background with trauma and trauma research. I also have done a lot of work with psychologists and psychology. And I think the most important fact of that is, I'm an experiencer too. So when I talk to these people, it's not because I'm writing a paper or a book or I'm trying to get my master's. It's, hey, I'm an experiencer too. Let's talk like we're peers. Let's talk like we're friends. Just tell me what happened and we'll go ahead and move on from there. And it's really wonderful, Chris. Like I'm honored to get to talk to the people that I get to talk to.
Super cool. So in terms of your kind of professional view on this, I guess, and it's what's funny about topics like this is it's, unless you are like a trained psychologist or a therapist or something like that, and even then, how do you deal with these cases or with these people and the trauma they're facing? How do you deal with them effectively or ethically, I guess I'd say. So
I definitely agree with you there. There's ethics of it. There's the safety of it, and especially, do I need to refer this person on to someone that's actually licensed and can bring them into better care? So those are all things that I have to take into account before I can start a preservation.
Right. So one thing I know that Marie and I have talked about a lot on the show is hypnosis, right? So what is your view on hypnosis for these cases?
As an experiencer researcher and preservationist, I am one of the very few people out there that is strongly against hypnosis. And there's a reason for that, is because when working in a trauma field, we have something called evidence-based therapies. So when somebody comes into contact with something that is traumatizing, there's 3 different evidence-based therapies for dealing with that trauma, working through it and processing what happened to you. One of my favorite ones is called prolonged exposure therapy, where instead of, somebody trying to hypnotize you and ripping a memory out of the dark sources of your brain that, your brain suppressed because its only job is to keep you alive and keep you safe, I would much rather have a person make a recording, say your entire story, use your phone or something, go ahead and say your entire story with as much detail as you possibly can. If you were a little kid, how old were you? What color was your room? What color were your pajamas? Just get as visceral as you can with all of the senses that you can. And once you're finished with this recording, listen to it. Listen to it every night before bed, listen to it in the mornings, just keep your brain on that loop. And they will remember more and more and more and more without having to go to what Rick and Morty would call an agent of averageness in a strip mall. It's really sad. If I had a brain tumor, I would not go to a family doctor and say, hey, can you please help me with my brain tumor? It's just most of the people out there that do hypnosis, they do not have trauma training. They have no idea what to do with those memories once they uncover them. They have no idea how to refer them to people that can help them work through this damage. And it's just incredibly sad at the damage it can cause. Some people love hypnosis and they'll sing its praises all day long, but I believe that the beneficial effects are short term. They do wear off. It's completely and utterly suggestive. You may not even remember what you're supposed to remember. Remember the Satanic Panic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of that was from people going under and having someone that was just completely not knowing what they were doing, basically feeding them these details of what happened to them. And then they would come out of it and say, oh my God, all of these memories, and just this completely insane story about something that wasn't necessarily true. So I would definitely recommend staying away from hypnosis. There's so many other things you can try that have already been medically and evidence-based proven. And I have had some really sad cases of experiencers that just went full gear towards hypnosis, and they uncovered things that they were not prepared to recover. It hit them all at once like a brick wall, and they couldn't handle it, and they didn't have the appropriate support. And unfortunately, they chose to take their life.
Mm. Mm. So that's one thing, too, that I think is really important here, remembering, or I guess sort of to make clear to people, right? So in your experience, what is the point, or where do you think kind of the limits of what you feel comfortable doing as someone who's, done some training and stuff in these fields, but is not a psychologist per se, right? You're not a trained psychologist.
And I tell all of my experiencers, like, look, I'm not a doctor. I don't have a piece of paper that says that, I am licensed in this, that it's my word over theirs that say that they can help you. Mm-hmm. And I draw the line very clearly that, if you're able to function day to day and you're able to go to work and you're able to take care of your kids and you're able to go to sleep at night, I'm willing to work with you in your PTSD and kind of doing this preservation. But when it comes to the point that this is interfering with your daily life and you're not able to sleep and you're not able to go to work every day and you're suffering from really severe health issues, I will always refer them out to a psychologist, or even suggest like, hey, if this starts getting really overwhelming, I need you to go to an emergency room and get real medical treatment.
Right.
Mm-hmm. There's no way to be too careful when working with repressed memories.
Right. And and frankly, that view and your professionalism there is why we feel comfortable having you on. So, it always makes me so upset when we go to events and we see people who are clearly deeply traumatized by whatever they feel happened to them, whatever they're remembering, and then see them be re-traumatized by the bad application of hypnosis. Or, I was given a card once. I was given someone's card for abductee research, and it was, if you Googled like where the address was that it took you to their garage.
Yeah.
And it's like that. I don't want to have my car fixed in someone's random garage, let alone my brain. Or, Yeah.
I love what I do. I consider myself a professional, but there's no story out there to me that is worth someone's, it's not worth their safety. It's not worth their life. It's not worth, them losing their job or leaving their family. I don't do this for money. I never charge. I never get paid. And I think that that's really important. You can get fame and fortune lost and regained many times, Chris, but once you lose your integrity, that's it. You're done.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I have really strict standards. And when I work with experiencers, there's this whole questionnaire that we go through just to make sure that they don't have any underlying mental health issues or physical issues. I'm very gentle and very careful when I do my due diligence.
Mm-hmm. So I guess this kind of a last question for you, and then we're going to start, we'll transition over to Kyle. What do you suggest to someone who thinks that they've had an experience?
If you think you've had an experience, first of all, either write it down, do word dictation, make a recording, make some kind of preservation of your own before you start doing the research, before you start talking to other people, before you go to a doctor, before you get hypnotized, whatever you do, write it down for yourself so that you have that very clean, very pure account of what happened to you. Details do fade over time, no matter how amazing your experience was. And then, if you want to talk to somebody safely, there are psychologists that I can definitely recommend that are open to this kind of stuff, where you can talk about it and you can handle your trauma without the threat of being institutionalized. So definitely write it down. And one of the most important things I teach people is tell your story first to believe yourself, not to make others believe you. You need to believe in yourself and your own voice. Other people don't matter. And that no matter what you've been through, you need to honor yourself because you survived. Whether you were 8 or 15 or 32, you need to honor that person that survived that situation, because if they did not survive, you would not be here to tell your story.
I think one of the things that's so compelling about what you're doing as well is, while it's about honoring the self, they're not alone, right? They're realizing that this happened to them and they have the choice not to be isolated with it.
Absolutely.
And that there's,
and you don't have to be alone, and that there are a lot more experiencers out there than we think that there are. This is not as rare as we make it seem, and that you're absolutely right, Marie, that you don't have to carry this burden alone with you for the rest of your life. And it's the loneliest existence I can imagine, having to carry this through and not being able to talk about it.
Well, honestly, one of the most interesting things that I've noticed in my daily life is when people inevitably find out about the podcast, and no matter how much I try not to be that guy who's like, hey, my name is Chris, I have a podcast, here's my sticker, please subscribe, and I won't shut up about it until you subscribe and I see you listening. As much as I try not to be that guy, when people inevitably find out about the podcast, the first thing they want to do is tell me about their experience, their ghost story, or their cousin who saw a UFO, or their love of Bigfoot. And it's always the first thing people talk about. And so if we broaden that definition of what an experience is, the people who haven't had an experience might be in the minority. It's kind of wild.
It really is. Once you open a dialogue and you just leave it open and you're ready to listen, you can walk into a Verizon store and you can have a conversation with somebody, and just giving people my business card, or just saying like, oh, I work with preservations. They'll ask me what an experiencer is. I'll tell them for me, it's someone that's seen something weird or felt something that they couldn't explain. And you're right, they will jump the gun and just kind of launch into a story. And it's exciting for me. I would prefer it if you would not follow me into the bathroom if you're continuing to talk. That's happened before at a convention. Like, I love to hear stories all the time. And it really does. It happens in the strangest of places.
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, anyways, speaking of Verizon or sweet cell phone deals you can get, now a word from one of our sponsors.
Hi, welcome to Metro by T-Mobile.
Hi, my dad is in serious need of an upgrade.
Yeah, my phone's a fossil.
He needs a new phone and a new network stat.
Well, when he switches to Metro, he can get an amazing iPhone 7 with HD Retina display for just $99.99 after ID validation.
Wow, $99.99?
Bye-bye, Fossil.
Requires porting of eligible number not currently active on T-Mobile network or active on Metro in past 90 days. With validation of ID. An independent database limit 4 per account/household. 32 gigabyte model only. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Hi, welcome to Metro by T-Mobile.
Hi, my dad is in serious need of an upgrade.
Yeah, my phone's a fossil.
He needs a new phone and a new network stat.
Well, when he switches to Metro, he can get an amazing iPhone 7 with HD Retina display for just $99.99 after ID validation.
Wow, $99.99?
Bye-bye, Fossil.
Requires porting of eligible number not currently active on T-Mobile network or active on Metro in past 90 days. With validation of ID. An independent database limit 4 per account/household. 32 gigabyte model only. See store for details and terms and conditions.
And we're back. So, NK, you came on. So originally why you reached out, or I guess really why we got kind of connected in the first place, was because of the work you were doing, and I was very interested. And, you know, we kind of started talking, and I got to meet a couple of experiencers. And you had someone who you thought would be, who just had a really interesting, compelling story. And so we want to introduce... I guess kind of the world, really, because it's the first time you've told this story, to Kyle. So for listeners, you know, and we know our listeners are sharp and also very skeptical. So Kyle is from the Midwest, somewhere in the Midwest. He has a family, normal day job, you know, just generally a pretty normal guy. You know, who has had pretty extraordinary experiences, I would say. And so, Kyle, first off, thanks for coming on the show. Yeah, absolutely. No problem, man. So why don't you kind of start off, I guess, by telling us... So first off, I guess, give us the history, right? So how did this start for you? And just kind of, I guess, give us the general timeline of what's occurred to you.
Yeah, definitely. So first I want to say, like, NK, she's been totally awesome through this. I mean, she definitely sells herself short. She's been totally professional. I'm 100% glad that I ended up choosing her to tell this to. But so no, I mean, like you said, I'm a pretty normal guy. I like to think. I do have a family, so. Also, I just want to say, you know, I know that, you know, for your listeners out there, for anybody out there, number one, if this is bothering you, I mean, if you do have something that's bothering you, definitely reach out, because, I mean, there are people, you know, like here today, but there's so many people out there that would be more than willing to help you. You know, I know there's probably a few that, you know, might not be ethical about it, but I mean, there definitely are tons that will. But, you know, I'm pretty skeptical about things myself. I guess a couple years ago, if you would have asked me if I believed in a lot of paranormal things, I would have probably said no, just because I really didn't have much of a base to go on. But, you know, going with that skeptic, I think super important. So, you know, anybody listening to this today, you know, definitely, you know, break down what I say. If you don't believe it, that's a good thing. You shouldn't just believe things just because somebody said something. But anyways, So yeah, basically, it's only until I'm in my late 20s now, nearly 30, but it was basically things had kind of happened all my life, you know, a lot of weird things, but it wasn't until I was probably 16 or 17 until I really started putting anything together and looking back on things, and then a lot of weird stuff started happening around that age too, that, you know, it's actually a little more concrete things for me that got me to push me into this kind of realm.
So what, I guess, would be, what is, I guess, kind of the earliest memory you have of something odd happening to you?
Well, let's press pause here for a second. If you want to start in chronological order, Kyle, I would suggest starting with your near-death experience, because when I, as a researcher, when you were kind of explaining all of this to me, that's a really significant thing that happened to you, and it kind of set the stage for you noticing these things later on. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I would start with your near-death experience and then go from there.
No, so basically, I mean, I had a couple things happen as a child, but I think it was around 8 years old. I had a tonsillectomy, and I you know, everything went smooth. Had my tonsils and had ones removed, and I think it was a few weeks later, my parents took us to Kings Island, which probably isn't the best idea, you know, after having a surgery like that. But you know, I felt all healed up. So after a day of riding rides and screaming, you know, having a good time, the next day I am at school, and I actually been down to tie my shoe. You know, we're going to recess or whatever, and some kid just barely bumps the back of my head. I mean, there's no big deal or nothing. And all of a sudden I get this like really warm, salty taste in my mouth. And so I run to the sink and open my mouth, and blood just starts pouring out. Like it's really, really bad. So I'm freaked out at that age. You know, I think I'm third grade. So I run down the hallway and down the stairs to the nurse's office, and she sees all the blood. She starts freaking out. So anyways, you know, we finally get it stopped. My dad come pick me up, and that night, you know, they talked to the doctor, and he was like, well, you know, that can sometimes happen, so just keep an eye on it. You know, if it happens again, definitely bring him to the hospital, which turned out to be, you know, a little too late. So that night I wake up in the middle of the night, and I can't breathe. And, you know, I'm having like a bad nightmare, and I wake up and I'm just covered in sweat, and I just can't breathe. I'm laying on my back, and I flip on the light, and I realize I can't breathe because I'm covered in blood. Like, it's total horror show. I mean, just horrible thing. So I go to the bathroom, and it's just like coming out way too fast, and it's really freaking me out, and I'm losing energy, all this and that. And so my parents, you know, they put me in the back of the car, and they rushed me to the hospital. And at this time, we're about 30, 40 minutes away from the nearest hospital. That's if you're, you know, traveling pretty quickly. So I don't know. I remember sitting there in the back seat, and you know, this time I've lost quite a bit of blood. My mom had like a tea pitcher, and it was nearly full. And I just remember sitting there looking at them and thinking, you know, what it was honestly, it was a weird feeling. It was the most peaceful feeling ever, thinking, you know, what is life going to be like without them? And it was just a real traumatic situation. You know, I still, to this day, and my parents, they won't talk about it. I think it bothers them. But I get to the hospital. They take me in the ER, and they do surgery. But I remember the doctor telling my parents that, you know, 5 or 10 minutes later, like I couldn't have made it. So I'm thinking a lot changed after that. I mean, I don't know. I felt now looking back on it, I think a lot of things started happening after that.
So what do you mean by what started happening? Like, for the listeners listening, right? So what kind of are the range of your experiences?
Yeah. So like I said, I was about for a little more background. I live near. Well, I did live. I grew up near State Forest. It's a pretty big area, one of multiple parts. But we were out there, and so I think it's like October. We're in October, and I think this is the event that really kicked everything off. So it's like it's still warm out, so we have the windows open. And I get out, like I said, I'm about 15, 16. I get out of the shower, and I walked into my brother's room, and his he isn't there at the time, and I'm like stealing some of his clothes, of course. And so the window's open, and then I think it's probably like 11 o'clock at night. I hear this just massive roar, and like I said, I've lived in near the woods my whole life. I've heard pretty much any animal that's out there. This was unlike anything I've ever heard. I mean, just if I could describe it, it's like a demon grizzly bear. I mean, it's just the loudest thing. I mean, and as soon as I heard it, I knew that there's nothing in these woods that could that could make that sound.
Mm-hmm.
So I run out to the living room, and I'm telling my dad, I'm like, hey, you know, did you? And he's looking at me. He barely heard it, but I think he had the TV on or something. But we ended up, you know, going outside. Never really saw anything. But that right there, that event kind of like started off a lot of things. And so when he gets home, like I said, there's walking trails and everything. So he would always walk his dog, you know, around the tracks down there at nighttime, you know, by himself, just as a way to exercise at the, you know, getting off work and stuff. And my dad's a pretty tough guy. I mean, he's like, you know, the American dad kind of guy. Like he doesn't really, I think, buy into a lot of, you know, superstitious things. So one night he comes home, and I remember he walks through the door, and I look at him, and he's white as a ghost. And I'll walk up to him, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? And I can see him crying. And this is, besides the time that, like, I almost died, I've never seen him cry. I mean, I knew something was really wrong. And he began to tell me that while he was walking, he had heard the same kind of roar, except it was, and keep in mind, this is a country road. I mean, there's woods on both sides. Mm-hmm. Basically heard something like that near him. He said about 50 feet off into the woods. And he was saying how it just sounded like, you know, pure rage, like whatever that was just wanting to, you know, rip something in half. And he describes to me that he, you know, heard like something sound like a bulldozer going through the woods and just ripping like big sized trees down. And he thought that it, you know, oh my, this has to be some kind of like a joke or something. But then he thought, you know, I don't hear any kind of engine or anything like that. The dog's freaking out and takes off running, and he just takes off walking quickly. And he said to me that he thought, you know, any minute something's going to, you know, just swipe out and get him. But he told me that he thought if he had took off running, that he would have died. So for my dad to say that, I mean, you have to know the guy, but for him to say that, it was pretty huge. But so, I mean, those are the kind of things that kind of kick things off. And so
another aspect of your preservation that we talked about, there's a lot of stuff that went on in that woods for you, especially do you kind of want to talk about the time where you woke up in those woods? I know it wasn't just one time.
Yeah, so this story here, I mean, this is really what for me was like, wow, something. I mean, this is real. So
so far then, you had this experience when you were around 8 of almost dying, then this experience of hearing this roar of some kind, and then about a year later, your father heard something similar. Now, you've mentioned to us that these all happened at the same time of year, right? So everything seems to occur or seems to kind of center around like October, around that time of year, like around the fall, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, interesting. And so when, but at the same time though, you were having nightmares, right? Or you were having things that you thought were nightmares. So do you want to go into some of those?
So about that time, it wasn't a nightmare. I didn't even remember this until I'm just sitting on the couch one day, you know, I think getting off of school or something, and watching TV like a normal day, and all of a sudden, it's just the weirdest thing. I mean, I can't explain it. It's just like all of a sudden something just popped into my head, and it's like one of those moments, like, oh my gosh, like, well, you know, I totally forgot about. How did I forget about this? But I clearly remember it just come flooding back to me. I clearly remember about I think 2 nights before, I had woken up in the middle of the night, and I remember sitting up in bed, and it was, you know, I almost like, if I can describe it, I guess it was like feeling like sleepwalking, except while you're awake, if that makes any sense. But I mean, something just didn't feel right. And I like get up out of bed, you know, put my feet on the floor. I'm looking around my room, and I noticed there's like a bluish white light coming in the windows, and it's like filling the house, and it's confusing. It's not alarming me at all. It's just something's something's up. So I get up and I start walking into through the hallway into my kitchen. And to give a kind of a layout, my parents have like a modular home, so it's not real big. So I walk through the kitchen, and I remember looking over to the blinds and seeing the light coming through the blinds. I mean, there wasn't a huge light source out there. It was just enough to almost like a super bright, a little more than like a super bright moon night or something. But so I walk into the living room, and I look forward, and I see. So my parents' bedroom is like straightforward. So to my left in the living room, there's two bay windows there. I see two beings standing. One's by the TV, one's kind of by the window. And to my right, there's a being by the door. And I don't remember. I remember thinking I knew they were wearing clothes, but I don't remember seeing their faces at all. I can't, like, it seems like I can't grab that and pull that back. But so I keep walking, and like I said, this is weird. It didn't alarm me. It was almost the feeling of like I'm walking into something I'm not supposed to. So I walk in, and I'm standing in my parents' doorway, and I look into there, and clear as day, like I can clearly remember this, and that's weird, like even more than a memory. And I see, so on my mom's side, straight ahead of me, there's some taller being standing on her side, leaning over top of her. And on my dad's side, there's one by his nightstand and then another by like the TV. It's kind of like staring at his nightstand or something. So as soon as I walk in there, I stop in that doorway, and they all turn and look at me. And again, I know they turned and looked at me, but in my head, I can't like picture a face. I know they're wearing some kind of like clothes or something. They were unnaturally tall. I don't want to be like, too cliche, but they seem to be like the typical tall alien or something. I remember thinking, oh, that's not what I thought it was going to be like. I remember thinking that, but so anyways, very gently, the one by the door comes in just like you would a sleepwalking child, grabs me by my shoulders and turns me around and walks me back to my room and puts me in bed. And I just remember thinking like, okay, you got to go back to bed. Like him telling me that or something, but it was like the most strangest thing ever. I mean, I'm sitting here, watch TV, and this just is like, I can remember in detail, like when I'm telling this, I can see it in my head, I can see that playing out. So that right there, I mean, that was one thing where I was like, how do you say that to anybody without it sounding crazy? I can't explain that that's not a dream to me. I mean, I don't know how I can tell that. Like, I would think it would be if I heard that, but it definitely wasn't. It definitely doesn't seem like that. So that was a strange thing, but...
So you had that memory that memory came back to you sitting on the sofa when you're awake at a certain point.
Yeah, I'm just sitting there, and it was just like, remember, like the feeling you get when you're like, you remember something that you were supposed to do and it was urgent and you just totally forgot about it. That how it's like, oh, you jumped real quick. It was like that. Like this just popped in my head. Like wanting to tell something about somebody and be like, I got to remember to say that to somebody, but you just forgetting it, I guess.
Did you remember it all at once, or did it require recall?
As soon as like that memory popped in my head, as soon as I began at the beginning, it just played like it was like it played through. Like I could remember each step of it. I guess it did. I mean, if that makes sense. It didn't just pop in my head. It's like as soon as I started thinking about it, it was following it. I guess I don't know.
Right. And what were you doing? What were you doing when it was triggered? Were you watching something on TV, or was there something happening in the house, or I'm just curious as to kind of what would be something that might have invoked it, or like kind of...
I was sitting on the couch and I was looking out the window. That's it. Okay. I was just looking out at the forest there. But I mean, nothing in particular.
It makes me wonder. So I know from my own kind of, I guess, experiences, right, where, and we've talked about this on the show too, right, that we all have things in our past and whatever that have been traumatic in some way, right? And so for me, some of those events have not been dealt with, or were not dealt with as a kid, very kind of in a way that would, lead to you actually overcoming them correctly, I guess I'd say. And so, I have anxiety issues, right? And I know for me, sometimes the things that set off memories are very, are just random. You know what I mean? There's no rhyme or reason for them. It's a smell. It's a sound. You know what I mean? It's very little things. It's, so I totally get what you're saying there. But but when you remembered this, right? So sorry. So you were kind of in the process of telling us this narrative overall. So so keep going with that. I'm writing down my questions.
You're fine. So at that time, I still really wasn't educated at all about, in the paranormal world or any of this. So that's kind of where that started leading me down that road. Cause I was like, I know in my heart, it's like, I feel this was real, but at the same time, I want to know more about it. And since then I've definitely, kind of done some more research. But so at that point I started kind of going back, over the next few years, I started going and looking back on things that had happened. So I have a lot of memories as a kid of, just, I guess, more of weird feelings, if that makes any sense. Like things that not so much of as a memory, but more of a feeling. But two of them, these two experiences really have always stuck with me. Growing up, I just attributed them to being dreams because I thought, that couldn't really happen in real life. So I guess I'll start with one. They're about the same time. I'm living up with my grandparents. Were there before we built our house. I'm young. I'm probably 5 or 6. So I would wake up a lot outside. And I know it sounds weird, but like in totally real life, like this has happened several times where, one time I was, near the highway and I would wake up trying to, and just be outside. And it's terrifying as a kid because it's, I feel exposed and I'm like, confused as how I got here. But I'm also like, I need to get back to my parents. I don't like being in the dark. I'm not necessarily scared of it, but who likes being in the woods by themselves at night as a kid? So, so this one particular night I wake up and there's a bunch of mounds where I live. Like, one of them is actually a pretty famous mound, but just giant, Indian burial mounds. Well, I guess, I don't know if they're Indian burial mounds. I know it's something to do with the Indians, but we had this smaller mound by my house. I'd say about 5 feet high. Kind of a little mound right there. It's just right in the woods. And before we built our house there was just always, I don't know if I can explain it, but always a really dark feeling about this place. We played there, as kids and stuff, but just always got a really dark feeling about these woods for some reason I can't explain. So I wake up at night and I'm laying on my back on top of that mound, and I remember looking up at the stars. There's no moon out, and so like I said, I'm right at the inside of the wood line, and so I look over at my grandparents, and I would say it's probably about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm just overcome with fear because I'm thinking, oh my God, like what is going on? I feel so vulnerable and exposed. And I remember looking there thinking I didn't want to move to get to the house, but I just was laying on my back. And so all of a sudden I realized there were at first I thought there were trees surrounding me, like a circle of trees, maybe like 5 or 6, taller trees. But as I look up, I'm looking straight up at the sky. I notice that they start moving, and I notice they're not trees. They're like tall beings like circling me. And I'm just looking up and I'm just so frozen in fear, thinking, oh my gosh. And I remember them they were talking. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but they were bending and looking over me, studying me, I felt like. So that was, that's pretty much what happened there. I remember later getting, also after that, I'm in the yard, and I try to get into the house, and the doors are locked. And my parents, this is like an old school house, so they couldn't figure out how I got out there. But again, I attribute it to a dream. So the other thing that happened, which is, one of the more interesting things is, and this has just been like a core memory of mine for some reason, but my dad and I would watch the stars sometimes, lay out under the stars on a sleeping bag he had. So, being out in the country, you can see the stars pretty big, and he's always wanted to be out in the wilderness and stuff. So one night at my grandma's house, he takes me out there, and we lay down on the sleeping bag, and we're just watching the stars. And we must have fallen asleep, because I wake up a few hours later. It's the middle of the night, and I wake up. First thing I see, is the stars. There's no moon out that night. The stars are really bright, and immediately I'm panicked. I'm thinking, I'm out here I feel like I'm by myself because he's asleep, and I can see the dark woods here, and there's no lights on. So I lay back down, thinking that I get scared enough I can wake him up. So I'm standing there, laying on my back, just looking at the sky. And if I have my vision, basically the bottom of it is the tree line. So I can see basically just black treetops against the night sky. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just sitting there, looking at the stars, and all of a sudden, from my right side, immediately, it's almost like I thought it was the treetops because it's the same shade of black. Just some big, massive, for a better word, ship just comes right over top of us. It's just from right to left, slowly moving, and it's not 50 feet above us. It's just obscuring the whole sky. And I remember I was so shocked because it didn't make no noise. It was just there, and without, completely silent, coming right over top of us. And I'm so scared that I can't even, I'm trying to shake my dad, but I'm like, I can't move. I'm frozen in fear. And I'm just, not so much that, but I can't believe what I'm seeing. I'm thinking, oh my, there's no way that's real. And I remember clearly, seeing the design of this, and it wasn't like a typical, what you think of as a spaceship. And it had almost like what came to mind initially was like a pirate ship. Now that sounds crazy, but it would sound like netting, like cargo nets and stuff hanging off of it. It was really like a big cargo ship or something. So I see it come right over top of me, and I remember seeing it closer, I think, but then that's where that ends. And so, naturally, I always thought that was a memory. And so my dad, we walk quite a bit down at the track, and we talk and stuff. And he mentioned before where he had things happen to him as a kid, but he didn't want to talk about it. I think, like NK was saying, people get traumatized. I think he always is a tough guy, like a man's man. Mm-hmm. But I think whatever's happened to him has really traumatized him because he doesn't want to talk about it he told me once that he's scared that something has told him not to, that he thinks something bad would happen if he did say about it. That sounds a little crazy, but
that's actually a really interesting segue, Kyle, where you say that your dad is scared that something would happen to him if he started talking about it. When you contacted me and we had our initial phone conversation, you had your activity pick up after that, correct?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, a lot of things happened there for a while.
I had forgotten to tell Kyle, and this comes directly from Earl Grey Anderson, one of my most beloved mentors, is that this is an interactive phenomena, and that the more that you chase it and research it and try to figure out what's going on, the more it's going to interact with you. So after this initial phone call, some of Kyle's activity picked up, which I'll let him talk about. And he called me again to tell me about it, and I was like, oh no, I completely forgot to tell you about this. But I had to teach him, ways of setting up boundaries and ways of setting up defenses that, it's okay for you to be interacting with me, but it's definitely something that's going to happen on my terms. And Kyle did a really great job with that. He was working on it super well. And I contacted him again before we went to do this show just to make sure that he was okay with coming on. And then that activity escalated more into a really amazing, creepy story. I'll kind of let him take the ropes on that, but definitely an interactive phenomena. So if you guys out there want to start telling your story and you want to start researching these things, I'm going to give you that honest advice that it's very possible that your activity will start to pick up and explode around you.
Okay, so Kyle, it's really interesting that this idea of feeling like something bad might happen by talking about this stuff, and then actually having in your mind and in NK's experience with other people too, actually having things start to maybe happen. So to continue with your dad though, so I'm really fascinated here. So your dad.
Yeah. So we were talking, like we have long conversations, walking the track at night. Just it's a way to me to talk, to talk to my dad and stuff. So we were talking, and I was, I told him before about, waking up and stuff like that. That night I'd woken up and saw those in the house, and I could tell he believes me, but maybe is scared that if he tells me more that it might lead me down a path, I guess, if you want to say, or fuel something that maybe he thinks I should just forget. But so I began telling him about, things that happened as a kid, and he was, seemed pretty interested to hear about it. And I tell him about I tell him about what I just said about, watching the stars and seeing that. And I said, that's always stuck with me, but it's, always seemed like a dream. And I said, I was just telling him, it flew over, and I said, I was getting ready to describe it. And I said, it was the weirdest thing, though. It didn't look like what I thought it looked like. It looked like, he goes, a pirate ship. And I'm just like, my brain kind of froze. I'm like, I tell you this? Because I'm positive. I don't think I've ever told him this. I remember, if I had, it's been years ago, and he's, when I was a kid. But he said, he was like, straight faced to me, he told me, he's like, I've seen the same thing several nights, because he'll sleep outside, like on the hammock and stuff. He's just, kind of one of those guys. He's done that, a summer night, he'll sleep outside or lay out there and fall asleep. And he said that on like 2 or 3 occasions that he's woken up, and this has been just not even a few years ago, that he has woken up in the middle of the night and thinking that he's like gotten underneath of a car or something. Like he's thinking like, where am I at? And then realize that it's not, it's just, that ship is on top of him. Jeez. And like usually going away. Or he said, it'll come across him like that. And he tells me this like, excited, like, oh my, this is crazy, because, how, I don't know, that to me, it's like, okay, yeah, aliens are real, because my dad would never say that, because it was so crazy to get that confirmation that he was telling me and describing my memory. That's another thing. Had I told him, because I always try to make sure, okay, how could this happen? Like, let's play the devil's advocate. Mm-hmm. He's telling me details about it that he couldn't even have known. Like, there's so fine details in my memory that it's like, there's no way you would have known that. If you asked me to describe it, it would be hard for me to get the details. And he's telling me details. It's like straight up playing the video in my head.
So what are some of the, can you give me some of those, or can you give us some of those details if you feel comfortable?
Yeah, no, he said, just saw like he said, basically described me like a pirate ship. He said, he's seen big ropes hanging off of it. And, I can remember that too. There was and he said, no lights. Like that was the whole defining thing, really, because there was absolutely no lights against it. So I just had this thing contrasted against the stars, against the night sky. And it's just this black shape in the sky. And he said, he was telling me how he couldn't believe what he was seeing because it was so quiet. And, he was telling me it had to have been some kind of like government thing. And I thought, I doubt that. But, again, I think he's reluctant, I think, to say these things, because I think it's in order to like protect himself as far as like his beliefs and stuff. I think if he really admitted to or took an honest look at things that's happened to him, he would, have to admit to him those things really happened. So, so basically that was a point where it's like, okay, for my dad to say it, it's like, and for him to know those things, like something's going on. I don't know exactly what, but.
So how old were you when you and your dad had this conversation?
Oh, this was just a few years ago. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
maybe last year, actually.
Okay. So suddenly then, so now suddenly kind of a picture is starting to form here of, so you had experiences that you thought were a little odd, or a little bit out of the ordinary, right? Not a lot of people can say that they had such a near, a close shave with death as a kid. And then to have this other kind of memory that you had of this noise outside, and then your dad having the same experience. Then maybe, one day, and the day that you had that memory, I'm assuming was like maybe a couple years after the noise event, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So a couple years later, you suddenly remember these other events, or this other event that happened where these beings were in your house, and then, but you've always had recall.
Kind of like I had just really I'd never really given it much shot, just because I thought it was so so outlandish that it had to have been a dream.
Okay. So got it. So these things were always kind of in the back of your head, these thoughts or these memories, but you always thought, or you always figured they must be dreams because there's no way, right?
Yeah, I mean, kind of random things that I thought, until I started piecing them together and thinking, I'll hear some other person say something and it's like very similar to something,
Right. Well, yeah, no. Well, so suddenly then your dad starts to kind of give you confirmation almost. And then I guess kind of the story opens up, right?
Well, just out of curiosity, so when you were waking up and you were outside, it sounded like you were a pretty young kid, like around 5 or 6. Is that?
Oh, yeah.
So what, if it happened, like even if it happened once or multiple times, like what did your parents say, or do you remember them having a reaction? Just because I'm assuming that they would be incredibly freaked out about that too. Like how did their kid get out of the house? And like, what was sort of the outcome of that? Like what was like, whatever happened, were they like, okay, we're gonna tie him to tie his foot to the bedpost, or I'm joking, but like, what did they decide to, what did they do?
So where we lived at before, I mentioned it was like, it was next to a highway.
Mm-hmm.
One time I woke up out there and again, the door was locked. And so what my parents did, like I remember coming back and knocking on the door. And at that time they had thought like I was, I had just been sneaking out to play outside or something, which I remember telling, like, I was visibly scared.
Mm-hmm.
My parents are great parents, but again, I think they're like a lot of people who don't want to. My dad's more so. He's more like open to these things, but my mom, it's like, nope, it's the devil, and that's it. Like, very close-minded about these things. But no, they actually they put a new lock on our door to where you'd have to have a key if you could lock it from the inside, and you'd have to have a key to get out of it as well, to get in. My grandparents' house, they put, so the main door, I don't remember them doing anything to that, but I remember they would like, my grandparents' windows are locked, and they never said to me, do you need, like it was my fault or nothing. They were just, they were definitely freaked out. But I don't think they knew how to deal with that. I mean, it's a good question, really, because I remember them putting the lock on that door, and then they put I remember having a bar like on the sliding glass windows, but I mean, besides them, the first time kind of getting on to me, and I was explaining to her that I didn't do that. Like I just woke up out there, and she thought that I was sleepwalking, because I had every kid has to like sleepwalk, but I had sleepwalked a couple times, but these were situations where she couldn't understand, like if you went out the door, if you don't have a key, how is it locked? So I don't know. That's a good question. I'll have to ask him because I don't really know how they felt about that. I've never really.
And it happened. Did it happen after they changed the locks as well at your parents' house?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would say like in total, I've woken up outside. Like, I mean, not since I was a kid, but I've woken up outside probably. I mean, in that situation, like you couldn't figure out how I got out and locked the door back. Probably like 10 times, 6, 7, 8 times. I don't know.
Wow.
So yeah,
But a handful of times. And was it again, when you were a younger kid, like this grouping of waking up outside happened between a certain ages, or like?
It's been a few years, yeah. No, I mean, I would say from like 5 to 10. I don't think it happened after 10 that I can remember.
Wow.
I've had some dreams that I've been out in the woods, and I'm pretty sure they were just like dreams, you know. But these are times where it's like I'm legit out here and I walk out.
You're in the woods. Wow.
Well, so that's I guess one question that I have is, how do you? Okay, so my dad's side of the family seems to really, like, everyone seems to suffer with various forms of like sleep apnea, right? So my dad, I'll never forget when he first was diagnosed with sleep apnea, the reason they diagnosed him with it was because he would get up at night and walk over to his bedroom window and start smoking cigarettes and talk about, and I know like UFO people are going to be like, oh my God, but he would claim that there was an owl at the window that he would talk to. Right?
Crazy.
And which is
generous.
The doctors, then he started sleeping with a face mask and it started going away. Right? And so for our family, it was always very, very clear that what was going on was, we're not getting enough oxygen to our brains when we sleep. Because we're like a family of bulldogs. So, we all have pug noses. But what I would ask are, every time people say that these things must be dreams or they should be dreams, as someone who has very vivid nightmares and very vivid dreams, and it's so obvious when they're different. They are different in kind to a physical kind of event. You know what I mean? For you, what is it? What is it that makes you think that they're real? I mean, obviously, some of these events have physical effects, right? Your parents changed the lock on the door. You had a bar put over this window. But, your dad recalls the same event, it sounds like.
That was one. I mean, that was really, right there was one where it's like, okay, there's something more to that.
Yeah.
In my mind, but no, like you and like most people, like I think that, I'm not quick to try to play something, say, oh, this is this, because, sleep paralysis, I think is very real. I think that, almost sort of as a dream world being overlaid on your real world, I think that can happen.
Right.
That may be that side of it.
I hate interrupting you, Kyle, but you're absolutely right. As far as science goes as well, Chris, there is still no definitive definition of sleep paralysis or why it happens and what that means. They have not figured it out yet.
So, okay, but basically, though, it's sort of it's just the fact that there are certain dreams that have similar, or certain events, I shouldn't call them dreams, but certain events that have similar motifs and similar things happening that then seem to have correlation with, or at least confirmation of some aspects of them in the waking world.
Absolutely. You can look at some of that research where people that suffer from sleep paralysis, it's called the hag.
Yeah.
Where the old creepy woman comes into the room and then she pushes down on your chest like she's trying to suffocate you. And we have reports of that from all around the world.
Well, that would be one instance where, like, a devil's, someone playing the kind of skeptical devil's advocate side would say, well, the brain comes up with these similar motifs, but something like a pirate ship, or something like, even, again, you waking up and then going to the door and your parents having to let you in and yelling at you and being like, what do they say about that? Like, what do they say about that today? Yeah. They just don't want to talk about it. They seem uncomfortable.
I'm sorry. Did you have something? I saw somebody trying to get in there.
Oh, it was me. It was me. It was about the pirate ship. Sorry, because it's so the first thought that came into your head until I don't want to put words in your mouth, but pirate ship. And even if it has something hanging off, like what was the feeling that was like the pirate ship? Because that's very like evocative and very specific. Very specific.
It's also very little kid though, right? It's also very.
Well, wait, let him answer. Let him answer.
Sorry,
Chris.
go ahead.
Let him answer.
Sorry.
Oh, Chris, I'm asking him.
That is like, so besides my dad like saying that and describing things, it's like, wait up, and I'm always, it's like, I would like it to be like, hey, I met aliens and we talked, like that would be cool, but I've always wanted to make, that's not what happened. So I guess to answer both your questions. So one other thing besides my dad, like giving me these details is that, and he's like, he don't have a good memory at all. Like he's not one of them guys who would, to remember that from my story back then. So that's one thing. Another is like, it's a lot of odd details. It's like, that completely take me by surprise. And I'm thinking, and so I look back and I think, I feel like if I was imagining this is not what I would imagine. Like what I see in my head when I say the pirate ship, it's unlike anything. It's not, I guess I say pirate ship because of the cargo things. It's almost like netting, you see on a classical pirate ship, like, the cargo nets. That's kind of what it seems. But they're also like, I guess big, almost like rubber looking tubes hanging down. They weren't nets. So there's a lot of details kind of like that it's like, that wouldn't have been my brain's first choice, I don't think, to pop in there, because it's unlike anything I've ever, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that would make me think that. And also, like that doesn't feel like a dream at all. Like I clearly remember waking up, but I guess the only reason I remember waking up outside. I guess the only reason that I thought that I ever put it as a dream in the first place was this. It just sounded. I didn't have a definition for it, so I think I just filed it away there. But no, I totally am aware of sleep paralysis and the things that happen there. I think that's a real scientific thing, and I've had a lot of things happen to me that I can't say, hey, that's not what that is. Like the other night, I had a, like NK was saying, things haven't happened for a while. And then just literally 2 nights ago, I had this dream where I in my dream, something just counting down. It goes 3, 2, 1. And I wake up with like a jolt, and I thought I heard like a loud noise, and I'm thinking, okay, is that my brain? Like, was that me dreaming that, or did that really happen? So I get up and I walk out here, and the DVD stack that I have, like the case DVDs, is like, that's been there for months, is like thrown across the floor. And it's like that. I can't explain that. It's weird. And then I go back to bed and basically have kind of a classic sleep paralysis. I guess you call it that. Like I wait. It's not like waking up. I feel like I'm awake. I feel pretty much clear-headed, but I'm frozen in my bed. I see something on the wall, like a black shadow. And at first I'm thinking, okay, it's just a shadow, but why can't I move? And then this big mass starts, moving down the wall up to the foot of my bed. And like underneath it stands up, like at the foot of my bed, underneath my quilt. And I can look at the quilt, like I can feel it. Something starts coming up across my chest, and I grab onto it. And this is, I can't explain this, but this is like the most terrifying, like I've ever been in my life. It's like one of those times. Like it's maybe not the top, but it's one of the tops. It's just so scary. And, like something's coming up across me, and I push my wheel, because this used to happen. Like I'd wake up a lot like this, in the middle of the night. For a while it happened every night for a long time. But this time, like I pushed my wheel so hard to move, because I got to, and I grab onto something, and all of a sudden my head becomes like a lot more clear. Like I'm fully awake, and I was thinking like, okay, you're just going to grab something that's not going to be there, because this isn't real. And then I grabbed it, and I'm blown away, because I'm like, I feel something under my hand. And as soon as I grab it, it's like grabbing onto, I can't explain it, but it's like grabbing onto a nerve. I mean, I feel this like super vibrating in my hand, and this noise, it's like a screaming, like, the movie E.T. when Elliot meets E.T., that kind of, noise. It's like that, but really, I don't know, different, I guess. And I remember like thinking, like, I feel like I have a hold of something I'm not supposed to. And again, I get this smell, and which, I've talked to NK about this before. In my dreams sometimes I have this smell, and it's just repulsive. It's not necessarily like a bad smell, but to me, it's like it's like a dead, evil. I can't describe it. It's just a horrible, like, gagging smell. And I get that smell, like it's just like something really bad. And all of a sudden, I mean, as it's pulling away, I'm pulling my cover down to try to like see what this thing is. And as I pull it over the top, like I finally get it, I feel like a stunning, like electric shock or something. And all of a sudden I'm like just up in my bed with a handful of covers and nothing there. So, I mean, that's one of the things. It's like, I wish I knew more. And that's the whole reason I'm doing all this. I mean, I wanted to maybe tell somebody else, but also, like, I want to know what this is, even though it's, super scary. Like, like the next day I feel drained because I haven't had any rest, but at the same time, like, I desire to know what is going on.
Okay.
So, man, Marie, that was
intense. That was intense.
Yeah.
Give it up to them for coming on and talking about it. We really appreciate that. And that's I think that takes a lot of guts.
Don't do hypnosis, people.
Don't do
hypnosis.
My big takeaway, live in a city. I'll tell you why. You're downtown New York. You know what's not going to come get you? A UFO. It's just not going to happen. I'm joking. It probably has.
We'll be back next week with another episode with NK and Kyle, kind of finishing up his story. Thank you so much for listening. Listeners, we know that this isn't kind of the average type of episode we do. All we ask, keep an open mind. This is a chance for you to hear from the people we talk about with their own, from their own mouth, right? Their own experiences and things. And it's I think, super fascinating. So we'll be back next week. Thank you again, dear listeners, for listening to the Mad Scientist podcast. I have been your host, Chris Cogswell, joined by my co-host,
Marie Mayhew.
If you'd like to contact the show, please send us an email at themadscientistpodcast@gmail.com. That's all one word. You can also follow us on Twitter at MadScientistPod or at Team Giant Squid for Marie. And of course, you can see us on Facebook, on Instagram, and all over the internet as the Mad Scientist Podcast. And again, our logo is the one with the pumpkin head, so it's easy to see.
Mm-hmm.
If you've enjoyed the show tonight, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where the money that you give to us will help us to promote this show further, to make it better, and just to spend more time making it.
Because we love doing that.
We do love doing that. Our logo was designed by Carrie Shaheen. Our web design is done by Desdemona Howard.
Woohoo!
And our sound design is done by Jake Cardinal. Thanks again for listening.
Thank you. This has been a Damn It Chippy production.
Hi, welcome to Metro by T-Mobile.
Hi, my dad is in serious need of an upgrade.
Yeah, my phone's a fossil.
He needs a new phone and a new network stat.
Well, when he switches to Metro, he can get an amazing iPhone 7 with HD Retina display for just $99.99 after ID validation.
Wow, $99.99?
Bye-bye, Fossil.
Requires porting of eligible number not currently active on T-Mobile network or active on Metro in past 90 days with validation of ID. An independent database limit 4 per account/household. 32 gigabyte model only. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Hi, welcome to Metro by T-Mobile.
Hi, my dad is in serious need of an upgrade.
Yeah, my phone's a fossil.
He needs a new phone and a new network stat.
Well, when he switches to Metro, he can get an amazing iPhone 7 with HD Retina display for just $99.99 after ID validation.
Wow, $99.99?
Bye-bye, Fossil.
Requires porting of eligible number not currently active